Slavery ended for African Americans in 1865 after the Civil War, but being set free and being treated as equals to white people are not the same thing. In 1963, almost 100 years later, blacks still lived lives that were far from equal to whites' lives. Nearly 19 million African Americans lived in the United States, making up about 10 to 12% of the U.S. population, but states and cities had many ways of keeping the races apart or segregating them. In the South, the rules separating blacks from whites were called Jim Crow laws. The name was popularized by a stage show in the 1800s in which a white performer in blackface makeup sang a song about a silly black man named Jim Crow. The Jim Crow laws said that blacks couldn't buy houses in certain neighborhoods. They had to live in less desirable areas. Their public bathrooms were separate, as were sections in theaters and drinking fountains. Some fountains labeled colored did not even have cool water. African Americans weren't allowed to try on clothes before buying them. Certain public swimming pools and amusement parks were off limits to them, as were certain restaurants and diners. Birmingham, Alabama even banned blacks and whites from playing card games together, as well as dice, dominoes, checkers, baseball, softball, football, basketball, or similar games. In the South, schools and colleges were segregated, so were hospitals, orphanages, funeral homes, cemeteries, and all forms of public transportation. On buses, blacks could only sit in the back and had to give up their seats if white people wanted them. Conditions were better for blacks in the North, but by custom and practice, the races were still mostly segregated there too. Special laws made it difficult for blacks to vote and elect people who would fight for their rights. For instance, in Alabama, black people had to take a reading test with tricky questions before they could sign up to vote. White people didn't have to do this. In 1963, it was still against the law in 21 states for a white and black couple to get married. A landmark case. Brown v. Board of Education. A third grader was at the heart of a case that overturned segregation in public schools. Linda Brown of Topeka, Kansas, lived near an all-white school but had to take a bus to an all-black school that was much farther away and not as good. Her father and 12 other parents sued the Topeka Board of Education. The case went all the way to the Supreme Court. Thurgood Marshall, who later became the first black Supreme Court justice, argued for integrating the schools, and in a unanimous decision in 1954, the court ruled that segregation in public schools was illegal. Separate, by definition, could not be the same as equal. After this, separating the races came under attack in other areas of life in America, and civil rights leaders asked, could other branches of the government do even more to help? In 1963, America seemed to be split into two different countries, separate and definitely not equal. The jobs open to blacks were usually low-paying: maid, janitor, dishwasher, driver, garbage collector, cotton picker, and tobacco field hand. On TV and in the movies, blacks were portrayed in these same roles. Professional sports teams were segregated too. Modern Major League Baseball teams were all white until Jackie Robinson joined the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947. He had to promise the team owner he would take insults in silence and ignore hate mail and death threats. What could happen if a black person disobeyed the Jim Crow laws? In 1955, 14-year-old Emmett Till was beaten to death because he may have whistled at a white woman. And then there was lynching. A lynching was a public hanging that could be imposed for any offense, even an imaginary one. The body would often be left dangling for others to see. Between 1882 and 1963, almost 3,500 blacks were lynched.